that they are next in line. I will share my screen to display any exhibits. As the chairman mentioned, please be mindful that there is a 30-second time lag in the presentation. The meeting information will be displayed on the screen multiple times during the meeting so that any resident who wishes to call and join the meeting can do so. Every resident who wishes to speak will be given a chance. Please be patient. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sawant. We'll move to the agenda. Under item 2 is completeness waivers, and I'm correct, Ms. Silverman, we have none, right? None have been added. Thank you. That'll move us to item number 3 on our agenda. It's resolutions. We have 2. We're going to start with the first one, 11-2020Z, St. Mary Archangel Raphael Coptic Church. Mr. Sachs.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is resolution for application 11-20Z. The applicant St. Mary Archangel Raphael Coptic Church. It was an application for amended major preliminary and final site plan with D3, D4, D6, C variances and design waiver approval. Property located block 4186.11, lot 2.11 at the intersection of Old Road and Hartle Lane. The application was heard on August 6, 2020. The applicant, as the board will recall, was seeking approval for the conversion of an existing vacant retail and office building to a house of worship with associated site improvements. The applicant proposes to keep the existing structure while making minor changes to the parking, to the exterior of the front facade, and modifications to the floor plans. A D3 conditional use variance was required as one of the conditions of the ordinance could not be satisfied, that being maximum floor area ratio. As well, a D4 floor area ratio variance was required. 0.2 is the maximum, 0.23 existing, 0.28 proposed. And finally, a D6 height variance was required as the maximum height permitted in the zone is 30 feet. The existing building is 34.7. And with the 3 ritual crosses on the towers and parapet, the overall height would be 41 feet. There was testimony from several witnesses, including Mr. John Plaskanka, the professional engineer, Mr. Peter Ibrahim, a licensed architect, Mr. Frank Miskovich, traffic engineer, Ms. Allison Coffin, professional planner. There were a few additional conditions of approval as follows. The applicant agreed that the site will contain no religious quarters and no accessory uses will be permitted on site other than Sunday school without further approval from the board. In addition, no concurrent activities will occur on site when ritual services and Sunday school are occurring on Sundays and religious holidays. Secondly, the applicant agreed to remove the existing K5 layer in the detention basin, replace with a new layer, clean out said basin, and reconstruct if necessary. In addition, those actions would be listed on the revised plans. Third, the applicant agreed that a stormwater detention maintenance plan would be provided for the review and approval of the professional staff and recorded with the Middlesex County Clerk. Next, the applicant agreed that the entire parking lot will be restriped and repaved where necessary to provide 8.5 by 18 parking stalls. As well, the front row of parking islands along Old Road and Hartle Lane and the end caps will be removed to provide additional parking. All of this subject to the review and approval of the professional staff. And 1 parallel parking space will be provided adjacent to the dumpster and cell tower, subject to the review and approval of the professional staff. Next, the applicant agreed to reduce the width of the detention basin sidewalk from 5 feet to 4 feet. The applicant also agreed that no parking signage will be installed on both Old Road and Hartle Lane, subject to the prior approval of the Township Council. And finally, the applicant agreed to provide site triangle easements at all site entrances and exits where requested and subject to the review and approval of the professional staff. The application was approved on August 6th, and tonight you're voting on memorializing the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Board members, you've heard the resolution. I'd ask someone to move it.
I'll move it. Jim Connor.
Is there a second?
Second, Kilduff.
Roll call, please, Ms. Silverman.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. We have one other matter under resolutions. The township has been notified that a complaint has been filed in the Superior Court concerning application 15-19Z. Mr. Sachs, your commentary, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it was probably about, maybe about 3 weeks ago. I received a courtesy copy of a complaint filed by Metro Storage LLC against the zoning board in connection with the denial of that application. I spoke to the attorney today, and he is going to be sending me an acknowledgement of service, which, assuming the board approves my representation for the board this evening, I will sign that, and then we'll be filing our answer within 35 days. So obviously, it's a standard prerogative writ lawsuit. They're claiming that the actions of the zoning board were arbitrary, capricious, unreasonable, and against the weight of the testimony. And we'll fight it out in court.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. So you are saying that it is appropriate now to name counsel, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Board members, it would be my suggestion that we name counsel Lawrence Sachs to represent us not to exceed the amount of $5,000. Does anybody concur with me? Would they?
Motion.
Would someone second it, please?
Oh, second.
Okay.
Kilduff.
We'll take a roll call on that, and then I have a resolution to read.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
yes,
Mr. Connor,
yes,
Ms. Keldorf,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. I hold before me a resolution concerning the same. Whereas Metro Storage LLC has filed a complaint in the Superior Court of New Jersey concerning the denial of application 15-19Z, naming the Zoning Board of Adjustment of Old Bridge as defendant, bearing the caption Metro Storage LLC plaintiff versus Old Bridge Zoning Board, docket number Middlesex L 006211-20. And whereas there exists a need for the service of an attorney to represent the zoning board in the above entitled action, and whereas funds are or will be made available for the purpose not to exceed $5,000, and whereas the local public contracts law requires that a resolution authorizing awarding of contracts for professional services without competitive bidding must be publicly advertised. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Zoning Board of Adjustment does hereby authorize and direct its attorney, Lawrence B. Sachs, to represent the Zoning Board of Adjustment in this matter, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be published in the Home News within 10 days after the adoption of this resolution. And this is to certify the foregoing is a true copy of a resolution adopted by the Zoning Board of Adjustment of the Township of Old Bridge at its public meeting held this date, October 1, 2020. Someone move it for adoption, please.
I move it. Dewhurst.
Is there a second?
I'll second Connor.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier. Ms.
yes,
Okay. Mr. Connor,
Yes,
Ms. Keldorf,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman and board members, I'll keep you apprised of how the litigation proceeds.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. We'll move to item 4 on the agenda this evening. It is as per the efficiency resolutions. There's 2. Mr. Sachs, I can take both right at the same time.
Yes, we can do them as a block.
Thank you. There's 2 6-2020Z fountains at Old Bridge LLC in the amount of $5,000, and 7-2020Z LCP Group in the amount of $1,250. Someone want to move them?
I'll move him. Dewhurst.
Is there a second?
Second. Kilduff.
Bill Duff seconds. Roll call, please, on both.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
yes,
Mr. Connor,
yes,
Ms. Keldorf,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Board members, item 5 is minutes. The reference of August 6, 2020. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to review them. Absent any commentary or suggestions for additions or deletions, I would ask somebody to move them for adoption as well.
motion to approve. Connor,
Is there a second?
Second. Kilduff.
All right, Bill Duff seconds again. Roll call, please.
Ms. Chevalier,
yes,
Mr. Connor,
yes,
Ms. Keldorf,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. That brings us to item 6, and we're going to do it right now. It's discussion, and it's going to be brief, I'm sure. It's the 2021 Zoning Board meeting schedule. I reviewed it, and I noticed that it does not fall, the meeting, there's no meeting that falls on St. Patrick's Day. Therefore, I don't have a problem with most of the other dates. Ms. Silverman, these have been checked with religious dates as well, correct? They have been, correct?
Everything's been checked with every religious. You'll note that there's one date that's that moved to the 4th Thursday later in the year because there was a holiday.
Correct. Okay, board members, please make note of that if you haven't. It would be the 1st and then the last 4th, it's the 4th Thursday of September of next year. Other than that, does anyone have any commentary on it? Any questions? Everything's standard. The reorg meeting is going to be January 7th because council will have met already, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Someone want to move these, the 2021 meeting schedule?
I'll move it. Dewhurst.
Is there a second?
Second,
second.
Kilduff.
Second, Kilduff. Roll call, please.
It's my new name.
Dewhurst,
Yes.
Chevalier,
yes,
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Geldof,
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan.
Yes, I'm afraid to speak. Ginger keeps jumping in there. All right. Having completed that, it brings us, folks at home, to the first application and the only application for the evening. Mr. Sachs, do you want to advise Mr. Sardo before I call it in?
Yes, Mr. Sardo, I think you've gathered, we only have 5 members here this evening. Obviously, enough for a quorum, but obviously you need a use variance. So, I mean, it's up to you. You still can proceed forward. You could put your testimony on the record. And if you want to hold off on a vote after that, that's certainly your prerogative, but I'll give you that option.
I guess let me ask the question first. Are we expecting that perhaps other members might appear and they're just late, or is this the 5 is what we have this evening?
Ms. Silverman?
Mr. Walker is supposed to be here, and Mr. Stoner I have not heard anything. I am checking everybody on here that's been going back and forth. I have not heard anything differently.
Mr. Sachs, from a legal standpoint, if somebody walks into the meeting 45 minutes from now after Mr. Sardo has made a presentation and they don't get to hear that, can they still vote?
No,
Okay.
no, they could not vote.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't vote at a subsequent meeting
Correct.
after they've had an opportunity.
I was referring just to tonight.
transcript. Right, but if they came in a minute after this meeting starts,
Okay.
technically they're barred from voting.
Okay, very good. Mr. Sardo, you're going to continue on, right, with your application this evening?
Yeah, my intention, we do have the witnesses here. We're prepared. We can present. I do suspect we will ask for a vote at a later meeting, and I'll provide the transcripts to Mr. Sachs and ask that the members that were absent who are going to vote on the application, that they, swear that they've either watched the video or read the transcripts prior to a vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sachs, for the advice, advising Mr. Sardo about the situation. The matter before us this evening is 11-2020Z. It's Waste Management of New Jersey. It's in the EDO 1. It's located 283 Highway 34. It's for a major site plan, preliminary and final with D variance. They're going to construct compressed natural gas vehicle fueling system. And as mentioned previously, John A. Sardo, Esquire, is representing the applicant. Mr. Sardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think, as you stated, we last were before the board at the June meeting. We've since then prepared some reports, revised some exhibits, and submitted them to the board. And tonight we have several witnesses to present to you. The first of which is Marty Tuft, who is an executive at Waste Management. He's the fleet manager. I see Marty, can you, it looks like you're off mute. Do you want to see if
Yep.
you're,
Mr. Tuft, John, if you're going to go with him, I'll swear him in. Mr. Tuft, if you can raise your hand. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right, please please state your name, spelling your last name and professional affiliation for the record.
My name is Marty Tufte, Tufte. I work for Waste Management and I'm one of the corporate fleet directors.
Okay, thank you.
and just for the purposes of the record, it's, you know, he's going to be a fact witness for us, not an
That's
expert
fine.
witness, obviously. So we're not going to qualify him.
Yep, that's fine.
So Mr. Tufte, can you advise the board what your position at Waste Management is and how long you've held that position?
Sure, John. Just want to thank the board members for having us this evening. We really appreciate it. As I stated before, I'm one of the corporate fleet directors of Waste Management. I've got over 35 years of service in with WM. Over the past 20 years, I've had the privilege of looking after our natural gas program as part of my duties. I also serve on the executive committee for NGVA America, as well as their technical committee that does root cause investigation on any natural gas issues in the United States.
And just the NGVA, what does that stand for, just for the purposes of those who are not necessarily in the know?
Natural Gas Vehicles America.
Thank you. Can you explain, just for the board, some of the background about Waste Management's green initiatives, just to give them a little background about the environmental initiatives you have going on?
Absolutely. CNG, or natural gas, is a large part of our initiatives with our sustainability program and our goals to reduce emissions. Waste Management operates the largest natural gas fleet in the refuse industry, with nearly 10,000 natural gas vehicles on the street and over 160 natural gas fueling stations that we own and operate. This represents about a $3.5 billion investment, equating to more than 60% of our routed fleet running on natural gas. We currently fuel over 70% of our natural gas fleet with renewable natural gas produced from landfills and dairy farms. Through this transition to CNG trucks running on RNG, WM has reduced its emissions by almost 20% since 2010.
And as far as how long has Waste Management been operating CNG-powered trucks?
We started back in 1999 in Palm Desert, California, and currently today we are operating NGVs in over 40 states.
Okay, so well over 20 years at this
Correct.
point. And a lot of these projects, are they funded solely by Waste Management, or is there public-private partnerships? Can you explain that?
Sure. We often deploy trucks and stations with governmental grants and green initiative incentives, including certain projects in the New Jersey area. WM currently operates 210 natural gas vehicles in the New Jersey area.
Yeah, I believe actually one of those grants was in the Christie administration that funded the last project you guys built in New Jersey. And this, you know, as far as this initiative, is this going on only in New Jersey, or is this a broader scope? Is it nationwide?
Yeah, it's nationwide, John. As I stated before, you know, we're in over 40 states running natural gas vehicles. WM spends about $400 million in a year in new truck purchases, and over 80% of those have been CNG in the last 4 years worth of buying cycles. It's truly one of the rare initiatives that is good for the environment, good for the communities we serve, and good for our stockholders.
Thank you. And in the as you know, as we've discussed privately in advance of this hearing, you know that one of the critical concerns that came up in a prior meeting was related to the potential risks associated with natural gas powered waste hauling vehicles. And one of the issues that I asked you about was if Waste Management, in your experience or to your knowledge, have there been any cylinder failures, either here in New Jersey or across the country?
You know, I can tell you, to my knowledge, and I've been involved since the very inception in one way, shape, or form or another, we've had no issues with any cylinders catastrophically in our fleet at all. And I would tell you that, so what do I attribute that to? We have a very stringent safety program and preventative maintenance inspection program. We take great pride in our safety culture and our safety record. We have a very defined natural gas specification for our trucks and stations. We have created enhanced driver training, technician training, and first responder training that we offer anytime the first responders ask for it. And we have recertification schedules to make sure that that training sticks and everybody, it becomes second nature. And then last but not least, we do root cause analysis on all industry events as if they happen to WM. And I think that really sets the tone for all of our employees to make sure that we run this technology as safely as possible.
And just for the members of the board, I guess I'll offer this. Just when we refer to a cylinder failure, those are the cylinders that are storing the natural gas on the waste hauling vehicles, essentially the fuel tank that's on board the vehicle. Just when we're referring to them in that question, that you understand what they are, where they are, and it gives a little bit of context to the testimony you just heard. And that really limits kind of the questions that I had for this witness, and he will be available for the questioning of the board, and he'll be on throughout the course of this meeting to answer any follow-up questions that might arise when hearing the testimony of others.
Thank you all very much.
So Mr. Sachs,
I said, thank you, Mr. Sardo. I'm going to move to, is it Ms. Shapiro going to handle this? Did I see her?
Chairman Sullivan, yes, I'm here.
Okay. Do you have any questions for Mr. Tufte?
No, not of this witness. No, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Sawant?
No, I don't have any questions.
Fire Marshal Garrity?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. I have just one, sir. I was taking some notes and I find it very interesting, the statistics. And they're in 40 states. 40 states handle CNG on trucks owned by your company. There's 210 vehicles in New Jersey. Could you estimate how many in all the states, how many trucks have CNG?
We have very close to 10,000 natural gas vehicles running down the street.
I'm sorry to make you repeat it if you said it before, but I didn't get to write it down. So it's rather natural, and not to make a pun, but it's becoming more and more regularly used, correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that represents about 60% of our total routed fleet of, a little over 17,000 vehicles and 15,000 in some of those routed. And it's, absolutely mainstream. And to be honest with you, Mr. Sullivan, most of our municipalities demand it. And we really don't have a choice but to run it.
And finally, one last question. Am I correct? You said 80% of all your new buys on trucks in which you spend millions are CNG, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Sachs, you have any questions for this witness?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Board members, I'm going to start with, let's see, we're a little mixed up tonight. Ms. Chevalier, well, I'm going to look at it the way I can see it here on the screen. Ms. Chevalier, you have any questions for this witness? You can raise your hand by saying, or wave it, no.
No.
Okay. Mr. Dewhurst?
I have one question.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Tufte, is it the intention of the company to go 100% with the compressed natural gas over time?
Yeah, Mr. Dewhurst, I don't know if we'll get to 100%, but we would certainly like to. There are certain places where we operate hauling companies that don't have natural gas infrastructure to supply it. But we are absolutely looking at how to, transport it in via trailers and other things. So yes, I mean, if we could get to 100% of our fleet, yes. And if we could get to 100% renewable natural gas, yes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Dewhurst?
That is all.
Mr. Connor?
No question.
Ms. Kilduff?
No questions.
Mr. Sardo, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, I'd like to call Thomas Mitchell, who is our civil engineer. He's previously been sworn. Are you there, Tom?
I see him.
There he is.
All right.
There he is.
Mr. Mitchell, I believe you've previously been sworn, so you're still under oath.
That's correct. Thank you.
Mr. Sarda, just for the benefit of those at home, would you please have him just put his credentials on the record briefly?
Certainly. Tom, would you mind stating your licensure, your place of employment, and your
Some people know
experience?
at home what he's testifying as.
Sure. I'm Thomas Mitchell. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as numerous other states. Actually licensed to practice in not only civil, but mechanical and electrical engineering as well. I'm the engineer of record on this project, as well as many other projects. With regard to CNG, I've been designing CNG projects for over 20 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell.
Okay. And Tom, you've prepared the site plans in connection with this application, including the revised exhibits, which we've submitted to the board, which you're prepared to testify to tonight, correct?
That's correct.
And I would ask, I guess, for you to share the first exhibit. And forgive me, Mr. Chairman, I forget if you hand the controls over to Mr. Mitchell or if you guys drive the bus for us.
That's Ms. Sawant's job. I don't
Okay.
have control myself.
Okay. And Tom, can you just read for the purposes of the record what the title is at the bottom of this plan and explain what the updates or differences were from the initial plan that was submitted?
Sure. This is drawing SP 1.20. It's the overall site plan describing the proposed new work. The changes we've made on this drawing are first, we relocated the CNG equipment area, moving it further east towards the corner. And that was in direct response to the board's suggestion, I believe staff's suggestion, that we move away from the entry driveway so it's not visible from the street. The second thing that we've done in discussions with Fire Marshal Garrity, we agreed to add another fire hydrant inside the driveway and just to the west there, to basically to allow better access and better line of sight visibility for he and his crew. The third thing that we've done is, as a part of our overall improvement plan for this site, we have added the proposal to replace the existing gravel yard and employee parking areas with asphalt. The employee parking lot improvements would also include striping, which was, I think there was a question asked about that in a previous meeting. Now, since we'll have a paved surface, we'll be able to stripe the employee parking area. We'll also be adding some landscape islands with some shade trees in that area in keeping with the township ordinance. The gravel paved area, the developed area of this site, was approved in a previous version of the site plan. We've reviewed that and the stormwater calcs that went with it, and this proposal doesn't add any more square footage to the impervious surface than what the previous approved site plan had. And in review of the calcs, they were actually done using the same parameters that we would use for asphalt. So there's actually no change to the time of concentration curve or any of the other significant parameters for stormwater.
Right. So Tom, that meets the standards for stormwater management and as it exists now on site, and you don't have to make any additional modifications. And just for the purposes of refreshing the board, I think it's worth pointing out that this previously had a waiver relief to allow it to be gravel, and now by paving it, we actually bring it more in conformity with the site requirements under the ordinance. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And the same thing, I think the landscape ratio probably improved slightly where there was relief required, and now we're adding, it's not a whole lot, but it is the landscaped islands and the that are colorized in that parking area, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're adding the landscape in the green colored areas on the plan. The other thing that Vina and I've been talking about is as part of this, we're going to clean up and kind of reestablish the planting areas that were approved as part of the previous site plan approval along the street and east and west property lines, just to essentially as part of the cleanup of the site.
Got it. And that's along the Highway 34 frontage there. I believe there's already somewhat of a little bit of a berm with landscaping on it. Your intention would be to work with staff if this were to be approved in compliance to arrive at a planting plan that met their satisfaction.
Yes, we'd work with staff. The planting plan, unless staff believes that we need to change it, I believe the planting plan for the street frontage is established. However, it's somewhat overgrown. I would say it creates a wonderful visual barrier from the street, but I think we could clean that up, and what I talked to Vina about is cleaning that up without sacrificing the visual barrier.
Thank you. And I guess just one other point for the boards, which I don't believe you covered, was the parking itself. I believe you previously, we do have a reduction in parking spaces, although overall we still exceed the standards. Is that correct?
That is correct. The employee parking area that you see is actually taken right off the previous site plan. The difference is there's an area towards the center of the property essentially between the two buildings that on the previous plan was shown as additional parking. Waste Management's using that as a post-trip inspection area, part of their safety initiative, where they physically inspect every truck as it comes in from its daily route. So they're using that area for a different purpose.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's all of the direct questioning I have for Mr. Mitchell at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Sardo. Ms. Shapiro?
Thank you, Chairman Sullivan. The board may recall that last meeting, I had requested that the applicant's engineer, Mr. Mitchell, provide us with, a review of the stormwater management, just to make sure that the impervious cover, or what was used originally in the stormwater management report on the original application, that the change from gravel to pavement wouldn't affect stormwater management, as you heard tonight. And as he had documented in an email to me a couple of weeks back, he did take a look at that. We provided him with the old stormwater management report that was provided to us with the original application. He is correct. A waiver was requested. Our ordinance does basically prefer that the parking lot be paved instead of a gravel lot. I would agree with that. And so I just want to report back to the board that we are satisfied as far as stormwater management is concerned. And that was really the only the only comment I had at the last meeting. I do like hearing, his coordination efforts with Vina on the additional landscaping for the property, because as you could see here, with the exception of, I guess, the top, right-hand corner of the property, there is a lot of impervious cover. So it's nice to see some of the green islands and some of the commitment to adding additional vegetation along the frontage.
Thank you, Ms. Shapiro. Ms. Sawant?
Actually, I don't have any further comments. The one thing, Tom, I actually forgot to bring it to your attention is now that the parking area has, you showed delineation of the parking spaces, the parking spaces will require a waiver because our ordinance requires parking stalls to be 10 feet by 20 feet. And these are 9 feet by 18 feet. I mean, unless Nicole has any other opinion, but I would support the waiver because typically we require a larger parking stalls when it is a shopping center where you have carts moving around. This is for employees, so I would support that waiver. But that's pretty much it. Like Tom mentioned, we did work with the landscaping plan, and I truly appreciate the applicant working with me and adding landscaping in the parking areas.
Vina, I would agree with you on that support for the waiver, because I wouldn't want to add more impervious cover to the site just to increase the parking stall size. Some of these parking stalls are for employees that are going to come and park and take a vehicle away. So it's not like it's going to be in a heavy activity where they're coming in and out and needing like a bigger space, And I agree with the shopping concept as well.
But that's it from me.
Thank you, Ms. Sawant. Mr. Mitchell, I think it was previously put on the record. There's no residential use there. I'm not residential use there. There's no public coming in to do any business there. Is that correct? It's strictly the employees, probably the supervisors, the management, and I don't know if you get any deliveries, but no public is invited in, correct?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I don't know if we have someone from the side. Is Joe on?
Maybe Mr. Tufty knows that. I don't know. I just wanted to assure everyone that the only people that are going to be in there are basically employees. I would have no business going there as just a resident. I can't take my refuse there.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's my understanding and expectation.
Okay.
But if and I think that was previously testified to as well as part of our.
I thought so, and I just wanted to reinforce that if that was what I heard, and it supports obviously the smaller parking stalls as well.
Yeah, it really is. The parking is employee parking.
Okay. Mr. Sachs, you have anything?
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Garrity? Fire Marshal Garrity, I'm sorry.
Yes, I do. Mr. Mitchell, one question. The fuel package on the Diesel Island now, what is the intention? Will that stay until your new process is in place? Will that be removed as you are going to be paving the area? It would be a smart time to remove the underground tank from there.
Yeah, there is an intent to eventually phase that out and remove it completely. The timing for that is a little bit up in the air because of everything that we've all been experiencing this past year. Financially, budget-wise, it's difficult to project when that will actually be removed, but that is the intent.
And also, Tom, I mean, I think it's the case that the proposal to buy, to get the new CNG vehicles themselves, it's not going to be all at once. It would be a phased transition, and that's another one of the reasons that we would keep that on site, or at least that's my recollection of our testimony from the previous meeting, is that we intend to eventually phase it out, but that would be a subsequent, I guess, demolition decommission permit.
Okay, thank you very much.
Board members, I'll go Ms. Chevalier.
No questions.
Okay, Ms. Kilduff.
No questions.
Mr. Dewhurst.
A question for Mr. Garrity?
Okay.
Tom, the fire hydrant moved on the inside. Is that the only hydrant that's there now?
That is the only hydrant that is on site. There's a hydrant directly on Route 34 on the other side of the gate. And the reason that
Okay.
was put in there is to get the engines and whatever equipment onto the property and off Route 34.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Mr. Connor?
No question.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Sardo. I believe I caught everyone there.
Thank you. The next witness I'd like to call is Noah Ryder.
Mr. Ryder, I see you. If you could please raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
My name is Noah Lael Ryder. Last name is R-Y-D-E-R. And I am a managing partner with Fire and Risk Alliance, and I'm a licensed fire protection engineer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sardo, your witness.
Thank you. So we did submit Mr. Ryder's resume, and I'd like to just, I guess, qualify him as a fire expert and ask him to put some additional credentials on the record for the board's consideration. So Noah, would you mind explaining a little bit about your background, and I believe you have a PhD, if you could provide that information to the board?
Sure. So I have been practicing fire protection engineering for a little over 20 years. I have my bachelor's and master's in fire protection engineering from the University of Maryland, and subsequently got a PhD in mechanical and mechatronics engineering. And I've been basically in the consulting world doing engineering design, performance-based engineering, and so forth for the past 20 years, all of which has been focused on fire and life safety related issues. I also teach at the University of Maryland in their fire protection engineering department, as well as at the University of Waterloo in their fire protection program as well.
And you've served, or you are serving, or have served on NFPA technical committees?
Yeah, so I in addition to that, I serve on a number of NFPA technical committees. I am currently the chair of local SFP, the Society of Fire Protection Engineers, as well as on the, I chair the technical committee for Society of Fire Protection Engineers International, their foundation.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, what we're proposing is to admit Mr. Ryder as an expert in fire safety and protection based on his credentials, and the scope of his testimony will be geared towards the natural gas, its properties, and this site plan and how it relates to the standards and the and such.
I have read his 7-page credentials and his in his resume, his education, and I was rather impressed, and certainly all the work that he has done. It seems almost endless. I don't know how he had time to get any work done with all the education, but we'll certainly accept him for what he is representing tonight, and also recognize he's also a professional engineer, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
We accept.
Dr. Ryder, did you prepare a presentation this evening to aid in your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and Vina, if you have that, I would ask you to I guess put it up for us to flip through as we testify here.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a managing partner at Fire and Risk Alliance. and we are basically a fire protection engineering consulting firm. If you want to just go ahead right to the first slide here, I can begin. I will say that if anybody obviously has any questions or anything, feel free to ask, and at any time, I guess, or whatever is appropriate.
No, let me just stop you before you get going.
Yeah.
And just for the purposes of the record, before in your preparation for this evening, I've shared with you the materials, the site plan, the application, as well as the transcript from the prior hearing, and you're familiar with all of those and you reviewed that information?
I have, yes.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Sure thing. So some of this you will have heard from earlier testimony, either this evening or in previous meetings. So I'll go through some of this quickly, but just to kind of give some general background in CNG, as you heard earlier from Marty, natural gas has been used for quite some time, dating back to the 1930s as a transportation fuel. Worldwide, there's actually over 15 million natural gas powered vehicles, in excess of 20,000 fueling stations. And so, this is not something that is either new or in short supply. Here within the United States, there's the statistic says 17,000 plus CNG powered refuse trucks. This statistic is a little bit dated, so it's likely higher than that. And that represents about 10% of the fleet, according to the Department of Energy. As was alluded to earlier, more and more vehicles, in particular refuse and heavy hauling vehicles, are moving and migrating towards natural gas. And in addition to just the waste management fleet, which is largely purchasing CNG vehicles, in general, over 60% of new refuse trucks are being purchased that are CNG fueled. Waste management itself, as was indicated, has over 160 stations and over 10,000 vehicles. So they've got a pretty good history there. So next slide, please. So, when we talk about CNG and its kind of prevalence, one of the important aspects to understand is the safety that is associated with it. And some of the things that make it equivalent or even greater safety than is often associated with diesel or gasoline powered vehicles. So CNG is treated with an odorizer. Usually it's a ethyl mercaptan, can be something else occasionally, but that is the typical one. And it's detectable at a very low limit, usually about 10 to 20% of the lower flammability limit, which means that you're detecting it about 5 times earlier, or at 1/5 the concentration that would be required for ignition. So you're smelling it well before it becomes a hazard. In addition, it's much lighter than air, and so it rises rapidly and dissipates quickly as well. So the hazard is actually moving away from typically occupied areas and where vehicles and personnel might be, which is a good thing in reducing the risk. In addition to being able to smell it early and its buoyancy properties, it has actually a pretty narrow range of flammability. So what this means is that it has to be in the proper mixture in air in order for it to actually be flammable. If it is less than a 5% concentration or greater than 15%, then it won't be able to actually ignite. Next slide, please. So some of these properties have been actually summarized by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration in a report that they have published on natural gas vehicle safety in general. And I've just kind of highlighted a number of things here in bolded, I should say. And what they say is that natural gas actually has a number of safety advantages over gasoline and diesel vehicles. It's detectable at 20%, as mentioned before. It's lighter than air, and so it dissipates to non-hazardous levels quickly. In conclusion, that when they're released into the open air, that they pose little fire and explosion risk. And so this is based off of their own research and statistical analysis, as well as the understanding of the physics of CNG. This is kind of the official position of the Highway Transportation Safety Administration. Thank you. So one kind of quick thing for a couple slides to compare, diesel and CNG vehicle safety, because that's kind of what the transition is moving towards. Statistically speaking, CNG vehicles are safer than a gasoline or diesel fleet. So even though there may not be a direct correlation to the fuel itself, statistically speaking, they have about a 37% lower injury rate, 31% lower collision rate, and at least at the time of the statistics from, again, from the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, they had 0 recorded deaths per 100 million miles versus just under 1.3 deaths for similar diesel fleets. So across the board, from a statistical standpoint, the vehicles themselves are operated safely and have shown to be safe. In addition, I believe Marty spoke a little bit earlier about the fact that they have never had a cylinder failure. And this has also been shown to be a relatively low event broadly across the board, not just with Waste Management, but with all CNG operators, that the rupture rate for cylinders is nominally 1 per 56,000 cylinder years. So from a risk standpoint, based on the safety measures that are in place and the standards and codes that are in place to ensure safety, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, all those things combine to help drive the failure rate to extremely low levels. In the event that there have been failures, most of them, when they have done root cause analysis, they've gone back and looked at it and determined that it's largely been a result of either tanks that have been degraded or damaged in some way, or cylinders that have expired that should not have been in service to begin with. So in addition to the fact that Waste Management hasn't had any failures, one of the things that that's attributed to is their inspection practices, testing and maintenance practices, and so forth, to ensure that those situations don't arise. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, oftentimes you may hear or see about fires in refuse vehicles. One thing that is important to note, or a couple of key facts, is that fires that occur in the hauling area really occur at the same rate regardless of the type of fuel that's operating or driving the vehicle. So whether it's a diesel or a CNG truck, if a fire catches in the hauling area, it is kind of irrespective of what's going on underneath the hood, so to speak. Similarly, if there are fires that originate within the cab itself, in the driver area or so forth, most of those components are identical. And so a fire there is nominally the same, statistically speaking, again, regardless of the fuel type. So a lot of the events that you may see are driven, not as a function of fuel, but from other incident or other things that have kind of led to the fire itself. So,
no, this is just to interject. Your understanding of the CNG vehicles is that when there is that kind of a fire in the hauling area, as you put it, the safety vehicle, the safety features in the CNG vehicles, there is some heat detection on those cylinders that in the event it heats up to the point where it's detecting a fire, it vents that CNG right out directly up into the atmosphere to actually disperse the fuel and to get rid of that flammable element.
Yeah, and so that's actually, I think is discussed in another slide, but that is correct. So one of the safety features that is present on the CNG vehicles, in addition to the odorant that is added to the fuel, is actually this third bullet point here, or I guess it's the fifth down total, but is that there are pressure relief devices on the cylinders themselves. And so in the event that there's a thermal exposure, that the tanks will vent, and because the CNG is lighter than air, as it vents, it rises up and becomes diluted. So it is actually moving away from where the fire hazard is and moving or removing the fuel that could potentially become involved. So that is actually a major safety feature in comparison to, say, a liquid fueled vehicle where if there were a leak in a tank from a diesel or gasoline, it would just simply pool and spill onto the ground and would be able to contribute to the fire load. So in most cases here, that fuel is removed from the incident. And so that is an added safety feature of the CNG vehicles. In addition, it's just worth pointing out that the CNG vehicles are required to undergo identical crash test and other federal safety tests and standards. So they are at minimum equivalent to safety in terms of diesel with regards to all of the tests and crash tests that are required. But then on top of that, there are additional precautions that are put into place that add additional safety to it. Specifically to waste management, they have additional safety features and specifications for their trucks and stations. In particular, at the stations, what they have is they have visual cameras so they can monitor what is going on. They have process monitoring systems that keep track of the temperature and pressure and so forth of the fueling process. They have flame detectors that are able to pick up any flames that might occur, whether it's as a result of fueling or from even a nuisance type fire. There are kill switches on the trucks that prevent the driver from being able to pull away from the station with the hose hooked up. And so they have all these safety features that are built into their stations to help minimize the risk of anything occurring on the vehicle itself or during the refueling process. That's all underpinned by the fact that they have pretty extensive training programs across their fleet and employees. So that includes the drivers, the technicians, and then it also expanded that to offer training and education to first responders that may be in the area that would be responsible for addressing any hazards or fires that may occur at the site. So they try and educate everybody throughout that might be involved in the process to make sure they understand the risks and how to appropriately address them in the unlikely event that anything did occur. Next slide. So I'll just take a minute here to go over the next two slides. Really address just regulations and the codes and standards. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going into this other than to say that as it relates to CNG vehicles and operation, there is quite a number of national and international codes that address all components. So going from the cylinder itself and how it's pressure rated and constructed to valves, breakaway devices, the flexible hoses themselves. All of these are required to meet standards that have been developed by well-recognized either national or international agencies. So that may be ANSI or NFPA or others, but all of these standards combined are what allow these facilities and the vehicles to be produced and operated in a consistent and safe manner. Next slide. So specifically, you know, in addition to some of the safety components that are there, there's also kind of the broader environmental issues and requirements and regulations that have put in place. And some of these are guidelines and some of these are objectives, one of which is the New Jersey Energy Master Plan, and that's freely available. But the intent of that plan is to steadily move away from fuel sources that are polluting and to try and move towards cleaner burning fuels and renewable fuels and so forth. And so one of the fuels that falls under that category is the CNG. And so there, within the state itself, there's been funding mechanisms when paired with the federal government, as well as just a push in general to move towards removing diesel vehicles from service and replacing them with cleaner burning vehicles. And so that kind of overrides or is one of the overarching objectives of the state. One thing I did want to point out here again is that the safety measures themselves that are employed by waste management often exceed what is required by code. So there's a federal standard that requires cylinders be inspected every 36 months or 36,000 miles to ensure that there isn't any damage or deterioration, because it's been recognized that those are two reasons why you may have the failure of a cylinder. And so waste management actually does this at a much more frequent basis, nominally 4,800 hours of operation or every 24 months. And then they do a supplemental inspection every 200 hours. So they're looking at and getting hands-on and visual with these vehicles and the tanks or cylinders on a very frequent basis, much more so than is required by federal statute. And lastly, it's worth pointing out that there's likely very many CNG vehicles operating on the roads in Old Bridge already. There are no limitations other than broad limitations that are related to vehicle size and weight. So many fleets in the area, whether they're refuse or otherwise, are already traveling the streets in that region. Okay, next slide, please. So the next three slides are really addressing the site. It was discussed earlier, and its layout, and in particular NFPA 52, which defines some of the required setbacks. And again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, and we'll see these setbacks shown on the site plan and with the electrical area classification on the next two slides. But in short, NFPA states that there needs to be basically 10 feet of separation between the point of transfer to other important buildings and highways, and that is met. There should be 10 feet of separation between a CNG storage container and combustible materials. And based on the site plan, as it's presented now, that is also going to be achieved. And then there should be 10 feet of separation from the compression or storage area to a public street or sidewalk, and that also is met. So all of the required setbacks that are in place by NFPA 52 have been met for the present design. Next slide. And so as Tom indicated earlier, this is the site plan, the revised site plan, just as a reference. And so you can see, even though the distances are not clearly delineated right here, probably for you on screen, for all the required setbacks exceed 10 feet in all directions from public ways, combustible materials, and so forth. Lastly, on the next slide here, as it relates to electrical area classification, on the next slide, sorry. So there is a requirement per NFPA that comes into place that designates certain areas that may have the presence of a gas as electrically classified, and requires that equipment that is there is rated as appropriate. And the idea, and you can see kind of the area that's highlighted here in yellow, is that in essence, they want to ensure that equipment is safe, and that there are no ignition sources present in the unlikely event that gas did leak. And so in this case here, what you see is that anything in yellow would fit within that classified area designation, and it would be classified as a class 1 Div 2. And we can get into details of that later if need be, but that would be the designation that indicates that under normal operations, there's no expectation that there would be any flammable gases present, but because flammable gases are contained there, that it is possible that they could be. So out of an abundance of safety, there's additional safety measures put in place on electrical equipment there, with the idea being that if there was a release, nothing in the vicinity would ignite it, and the gas would be able to simply rise out of the hazardous area. And so it reduces the risk of any ignition occurring. Next slide, please. So as it relates to the CNG station safety, I'm not sure how much familiarity you all have, but the proposed station is primarily going to be a time fill station, which means that it is slowly feeding the natural gas into the vehicles. It automatically stops when they are full. And but what this means is that the flow rates that are coming out of the compressor and going through the flex line to the trucks themselves is actually coming at a much reduced rate, so that in the event that something happened, the gas would actually be leaking out even slower. On top of the actual filling process itself, there's numerous safety features and inspections that are done at the facility and are baked into Waste Management's design and approach. And so that includes daily, biweekly, and monthly inspections that occur of the refueling operations to ensure that everything is functioning and operating properly. It has an emergency shutdown system as well, breakaway devices in the event that a truck failed to disconnect. And importantly, there's a process control system that monitors the pressure, temperature of the process, as well as the flame and gas detectors that I mentioned earlier. And all of those are tied into a system that is ensuring that things are operating appropriately. And in the event that something is not, and say a flame or gas detector picked up a signal, it would automatically trigger the emergency shutdown system. Everything would stop operating, And in addition, it would relay that information to key waste management personnel that something was amiss and needed to be remediated. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, and kind of just laid out, there's quite a number of CNG vehicles and stations that are operating worldwide. But importantly as well is just within New Jersey, there are currently 28 fueling stations that include 17 publicly accessible ones for passenger vehicles or lightweight vehicles to refuel. So we have your average citizen that's actually filling up CNG vehicles in addition to fleet use, and then 11 private stations similar to the ones that Waste Management is proposing here. Some of this infrastructure and some of the fleet turnover to CNG was actually funded by the New Jersey Clean Cities Coalition, which has put about $50 million into pushing CNG fleets and fueling stations out throughout the state. Next slide, please. And just to kind of continue that in terms of the fleet discussion, it's by no means is Waste Management unique in this endeavor. Multiple gas companies, including South Jersey, New Jersey Natural Gas, Elizabethtown, et cetera, all have CNG fleets for many of their company vehicles. A number of other refuse companies as well, MJF Materials and others have CNG fleets that are operating. And outside of that, there's also large mass transit vehicles that New Jersey Transit and several others operate that, so many of the buses that you might see are CNG powered and have been operating for over 20 years. Again, I think Marty mentioned this earlier, but within New Jersey, Waste Management already has over 200 CNG vehicles operating in the state, which is about 36% of its fleet, and is planning for more. And you can see that the fleet is located in a number of cities right now in Camden, Trenton, and Toms River. And obviously this would be in additional location. One other point that I kind of wanted to bring up, it's not related to refuse, but is that in addition to refuse vehicles, there is actually a push to have first responder and emergency services vehicles be CNG operated. And so a number of years ago, there was actually a CNG fire truck in the US that kind of made the rounds more as a display vehicle. And within the past, I think it's 4 or 5 years, the Bossier City Fire Department in Louisiana actually has purchased and operates numerous CNG EMS and basic fire department vehicles, and have continued to purchase them as new replacement vehicles required. So, CNG is clearly safe enough that emergency service vehicles and departments feel comfortable using it on a routine basis. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the last slide I have, and it really is just kind of my conclusions based on a review of the information that's out there, the specifics regarding this station itself, and in general Waste Management's operations. And in short, you can see the bullets here, but is that, both the vehicles and fueling stations are designed right from the ground up, from the codes that were developed that ensure safety all the way through the manufacturing and the testing, inspection, and maintenance programs that are put in place to ensure that there's safety throughout the lifespan of the vehicles in the stations. To minimize the risk associated with them. Waste Management has probably the largest CNG refuse fleet by far in the U.S. and has been able to safely operate those 10,000 vehicles in 160 stations for over 20 years in a safe manner. And they've done that through all the things that we've discussed here. But importantly is that they're going above and beyond what's required by the standards, and including the training of the local personnel that may be responding. From my review of the site and the plans that Tom has presented, it meets all the mandated safety requirements with regards to separation distances. And in conclusion, my stance is that because of the inherent nature of CNG, its physical properties, and the safe design of the facility, that that this facility can operate in a safe, efficient, and effective manner due to all the steps that are being taken, both at Waste Management's level, but also just within the CNG industry itself. And that's all I have for right now.
And no, I think you certainly have addressed, discussed the setbacks from the NFPA and talked about the site. But just to make it clear, you've reviewed how far away adjacent sites are, structures on adjacent sites, whether it be from the equipment area or the overhead fueling trusses. In your opinion, does it present a concern for you at all from the adjacent sites and uses, given what you've analyzed and what you know about CNG?
No. So I think all of the minimum setbacks are met as stated, but in addition, as mentioned, because of the property of CNG being lighter than air, I don't see any obvious risk to any operations offsite, any buildings offsite. In the event of a release, the gas would quickly rise and disperse. And so as based on the information I've seen to date and I've been able to review, I don't see any risk to adjacent facilities.
Thank you. That was my last and only question for this witness. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sardo, and thank you, Dr. Ryder. Ms. Shapiro of the witness?
Chairman Sullivan, I don't have anything for this witness. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sawant for this witness?
I don't have anything for this witness either.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sachs, do you have anything?
Mr. Chairman, I'm satisfied. I have no questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask each of the board members individually again. Mr. Dewhurst, do you have anything at this point?
No questions.
Mr. Connor, do you have anything?
No questions.
And Ms. Skilduff, do you have any concerns?
No questions.
Okay, and I don't. Mr. Fire Marshal Garrity, would you weigh in, please?
No, I have no questions. I would just like to thank them for providing all the information. I did respond to the site about 3 times with the people on site there too. And I feel that it will be a safe site at this point. And thank you for adding the additional hydrant.
Okay, Mr. Garrity, of all people, I would ask you, it's a rather, I wouldn't say lengthy presentation, but a rather full coverage of, I think, most issues. Is there anything that you have any concern about, whether it be adjacent properties or whether it be about, obviously I can't deny the science of what this man is telling me, that this dissipates. And,
no, he is 100% accurate, but the one factor that we always know about on a fire service is the human factor.
Absolutely.
As long as the human factor doesn't play a part into running into the piping, into the filling area, you can never count out the human factor. The building, the daycare center, the auto body shop, that concerned me as well as Chief Walker. But there are 2 buildings in between the fueling station and the daycare. Material does rise, but at some point it does reach the 5 to 15% limit. And as long as there's no ignition source in that, wherever that area is, you're good to go. So I'm comfortable with what was presented and the safety of the site.
Mr. Fire Marshal, have you gone to any of the other sites that have CNG fueling systems?
No, I have not. I have done a lot of research on it, looked on the internet,
Okay.
spoken at length with Tom Mitchell about it, have seen another presentation on a PowerPoint program as well. And it's the wave of the future. This is what we're going to see a lot of.
Well, clearly, I mean, I mentioned that early in the outset of this, that half of, I think half, if not more, of the New Jersey Transit buses have been using this since, I see on here 2000. I didn't know the date, but reading this, it says 2000. I would like to know, Fire Marshal Garrity brought up an interesting point, Mr. Sardo. And could you refresh our memory as to the installation? Could a truck run into any of these trusses, or are they ballarded? Could we go over that one more time?
Sure, and actually it probably makes sense for me to ask that directly of our site engineer who designed it. Tom, are you, there you are.
Yeah, so several things. With the trusses are actually designed with a concrete base, similar, actually even more robust than a light pole base, number one. They're designed, we've standardized the design for the trusses themselves. They're actually designed for hurricane force winds for impact. We have seen these experience hurricanes, and they're the only things nearby that survive. We also do put bollards in front of them so that if a truck inadvertently backed towards the columns that support the truss, these are oversized bollards. We actually make them 6 feet tall, so they're incredibly visible. We use 8-inch diameter concrete filled heavy wall pipe. The code actually for impact protection only calls for a 4-inch diameter pipe and only 3 feet tall. So we go quite a bit beyond for protecting those columns. As far as the compound goes, it's actually entirely surrounded on all traffic sides, sides that potentially could see a vehicle operated near it with a row of bollards on 4-foot centers. So it's completely surrounded with bollards on those exposed sides.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question of Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, how many fueling positions are there? How many fueling stations?
In the center row, there are, going from memory here, I don't have the drawing up, but there are 8 per section. I believe there's 3 sections in the center row, so that's 24. And then on the back, there's another 4 per section, and that'd be another 12. So. All right. And I mean, is it conceivable to have all the fueling positions being utilized at the same time? Is that a standard practice or not? It's conceivable. It's conceivable that they would all be used at once.
Okay. All right. Because I'm just wondering if there's some type of spacing that could occur between these vehicles when they're being fueled. Perhaps, just to avoid some of that human error that Mr. Garrity is talking about. Keeping vehicles spaced apart while they're being fueled. That might be some food for thought.
Well, I don't think they all get fueled at one time, Mr. Sachs.
Well, I'm not sure if they do or not, but
whether they're parked or not is what I'm saying.
Parking is not the issue, I guess.
That's what I'm saying. So if they're not all getting fueled at the same, could we have Mr. Mitchell or the directors?
So, yeah, so I was thinking in terms of parking. So
Okay.
obviously, as these vehicles, the fleet comes back and returns to the yard at night, they're parked in their stalls, and it's conceivable that every stall would be
Well,
filled.
that I understand, but in
Um,
terms of fueling everything at the same time, that's not likely to happen. Am I correct?
They typically, as they come in, they plug in, and a typical system will start to fuel those first vehicles in immediately. Um, they will continue to fuel until they're full. Others, as they come in and plug in, would also be would start to fuel. So um, it's highly likely that some of those vehicles would not be filling, but a number of them would.
Okay.
As far as the parking layout that we've got in stalls, we as Marty said earlier, we've got a lot of experience with these parking lots and laying them out in a way that is conducive to safe operating of the trucks and ease of moving without creating an incident. So,
Yeah, Tom, if I could just add, I was looking back at our prior, from the last hearing. I think the first exhibit we submitted, A1, was a representative picture of the fueling truss. Um, and just to add, in addition to the bollards and the cement columns, it looks like the trucks would be parked 4 next to one another and then separated by space by a bollard. So they're really kind of in banks of 4. And then there was also wheel stops that would at the end of the space, so that it would prevent rolling if a truck were to I guess roll forwards. There would be that stop bar there for it as well. Is that accurate?
that is accurate. In addition, one of the advantages of having the overhead truss is we're able to add lighting in the walking aisle between the trucks when they're parked, giving the employees a lot better just safety for moving around that area, and the ability for proper inspections. It really is a true improvement in what they're doing out there.
All right. So from what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Mitchell, and from Mr. Sardo, it appears that each truck, when it's in a fueling position, is really surrounded by safety measures, i.e. the bollards, wheel stops, curbing, that really self-contain that vehicle while it's being fueled. Would that be accurate?
I think that'd be accurate. It's in a designated space with plenty of walking room around it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And actually, to go back to Mr. Garrity, Tom, is that something you're comfortable with?
So I'm comfortable with the layout and how it's done. It's all the safety precautions have been taken or at least looked at, but there's always the human factor.
Right, I understand, but at least as long as there are these measures in place, it
I don't think there's anything else they can do.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, if one hose or one link erupted or broke, doesn't it shut the entire system down?
So the hoses are very unlikely to break. The only time that there is a potential is if the vehicle tried to drive away and was still connected. Noah mentioned this. There's a couple of fail safes for that. One is Waste Management's trucks have an interconnect to the fueling door, where you connect that vehicle to the hose. If that door is open and the vehicle's hose is connected, it disables the engine. You can't actually start. But
all that. What I meant was if some problem happens at any one of the fueling ports, would it not temporarily shut the whole system down on both trusses?
If something happened, there is a leak detection system that in the program, in the process, if a hose were to leak, you know, it's likely it wouldn't be a large leak to begin with, and it'd be detected.
I was more concerned of whether it would, and I think I heard Dr. Ryder say that the system would shut off if there was a problem from the cylinder. Dr. Ryder, may I ask you?
Yeah, yes. So what I was addressing earlier is that, yes, there are emergency my understanding is there's an emergency shutdown system at the facility that would shut off the fueling process if any number of either process controls were that were being monitored were deemed to be inappropriate, or if the gas or flame detection systems that are being proposed were activated.
Right.
That is my current understanding.
Okay, and would you have any more concern whether one truck was filling at a time or 20?
No,
Okay.
because
It works the same way, correct?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you have 1 or 20 or all 37,
Right.
I think is the number, it makes no difference.
You're still a fail-safe.
Correct.
Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Sardo.
Thank you. I have my next witness is Aaron Jones.
Do you want to give the stenographer a break? Mr. Sardo, perhaps? Let me ask, Mr. Lomondazzi?
Can we take 1 or 2 minutes?
Well, we're going to take 5 if we take 1 or 2. So is that okay with you, Mr. Sardo?
I'm glad you suggested it. I don't want
I
anyone.
think it's a good time to do it. It's
Where-
9:07 right now on my phone. Why don't we do 9:15? Would that be okay, Mr. Sardo?
Yep, that works for me. Thank you.
And
we're gonna go
Mr.
to
Sardo,
recess
Mr. Sardo, just a question. Is Mr. Jones your last witness?
Mr. Jones is my last, well, yes, except I was going to recall the planner just to
Oh, sure. Okay, that's fine.
talk about what the changes and modifications, the impact. of
Okay.
the variance.
No problem.
I think that would be very limited.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, let's stand in recess till 9:15. Please shut off, mute yourself and shut your video off.
Thank you.
Thank everyone else. Looks like we have 5 board members, board attorney and board secretary, Ms. Silverman. Stenographer is back. Mr. Lomadarzi, you're ready to go when we're ready? Okay. Ms. Sawant, are you back?
I am.
And Ms. Shapiro?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and we'll just wait for Mr. Sardo to come up on the screen.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. It says the administrator has to let me start my video.
Where is he?
I did it.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Okay, you ready to go back, Mr. Sardo? I'm going to call this application again. This is 11-2020Z. It's Waste Management of New Jersey, 283 Highway 34. We were in recess. We have now come back to order. Ms. Silverman, please call the roll.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Here.
Ms. Chevalier?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Kilduff?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Here.
Ms. Swan?
Here.
Gary?
Here.
And myself, Kim Sullivan, Vice Secretary.
Back to you, Mr. Sardo.
Thank you. For my next witness, I have Aaron Jones. He's a engineer with Fusion Engineering. And he's, are you there, Aaron? Yes.
I see you. Yes. Okay. Mr. Jones, if you can please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Sure. My name's Aaron Jones, Jones. I am a principal and partner engineer at Fusion Engineering based in Naperville, Illinois. We are a multidisciplinary engineering company that focuses on accident investigation. My area of expertise and background is primarily in vehicle fire investigation and materials failure analysis.
Thank you. We'd like to call this witness and have him certified as an expert in fire investigations. If that's,
Mr. Jones, I assume you've testified in front of planning boards, zoning boards, similar land use boards throughout the country?
No, this is my first time testifying in front of a board. I've testified in courts throughout the United States and in other countries around the world as well.
All right, so you've been qualified as an expert in accident safety, fire safety, and other courts and jurisdictions in the United States?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, in light of the fact that this witness has been qualified in court, which is pretty much the same scrutiny that would be applied in front of a land use board in terms of qualifying an expert, I would have no objection to it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll accept his credentials and his expertise.
thank you. Mr. Jones, in your experience, have you had occasions to investigate fires or accidents on behalf of Waste Management in the past?
Yes, I've investigated fires on behalf of Waste Management many times in the past.
And you've also investigated waste hauling vehicle fires throughout the country, whether Waste Management or other companies or haulers?
I've investigated fires on behalf of many of the larger haulers in the United States, as well as some of the vehicle manufacturers as well.
And can you have you made any conclusions in the course of those investigations as to I guess anecdotally, can you state some of the main causes in your experience of waste hauling vehicle fires, and can you compare your experience with Waste Management versus maybe smaller carriers?
Sure. First of all, I would say that there's two primary causes of vehicle or waste hauling truck fires. Okay, and they compete with each other, but typically you'll find that the more common cause is trash from the hauling body falling onto hot surfaces of the truck, resting there for a period of time and igniting. And after it ignites, that material, be it paper, plastic, light plastics, even wood, it burn in place or get blown to another part of the truck where it will ignite and cause the truck to burn. A lot of times, those what I call trash fires are sometimes difficult to put out just because of where the trash may land. Although cleanliness has a big influence on that, and I'm talking about the cleanliness of the truck. Waste management does a very good job about that, simply because they tend to have clean equipment and they focus on clean equipment. The other question that you asked, well, I'll continue. Electrical fires are probably the second or 1A ranking of fire causes on waste hauling vehicles. These are typically due to cable management and things of that nature. As far as they're concerned, they're typically related to poor maintenance practices or just time on the vehicle, where things get knocked around due to the service environment of the vehicles. Things get moved around, or restraining devices that hold cables may fracture, and then things go from there. Waste management has a very high level inspection program that tends to minimize the number of electrical fires they have. And I would say overall, the number of fires that I investigate for waste management that I would call severe, that are related to trash, is relatively small compared to other carriers that I work for. I believe you asked me another question as well. Related to differences between diesel and CNG.
Yeah, so you and I have discussed previously, and this was a surprising fact to me, that you're talking about the themselves and the number of hot surfaces under the vehicle that might contribute to the starting of a fire. And I believe what you told me was that in a diesel truck, there's actually something like 3 times the amount of surface area in the exhaust system as compared to a CNG.
Correct.
So I thought that was significant. If you could talk about that briefly, and the
Sure.
risk, relative risk, I guess, comparing a new CNG truck versus a traditional diesel.
Sure. So this goes back to what I would call the trash fire, hot surface ignition of light combustible materials such as paper, plastic, woods, and things of that nature. In a modern trash hauling vehicle, anything made after the year 2007, emission requirements have changed dramatically. And due to these emission requirements, engine and truck manufacturers have had to change their exhaust systems dramatically in order to have the exhaust exit the vehicle in a suitable condition that's appropriate for the environment and meeting federal regulations. In order to do that, these manufacturers have to add secondary equipment on the exhaust system. This includes things that are known as secondary catalysts, particulate filters, and all these other pieces of equipment. These pieces of equipment get extremely hot while the vehicle is operating. It is very difficult to protect those pieces of equipment just because of their sizes and locations. And take it another step further, is these particulate filters are actually in the muffler of the truck, if you will, and they actually have a burner inside of them where raw fuel is injected into them in order to burn out the trapped carbon deposits that the filter itself traps. And during this process, it's called the regeneration. You get extremely high temperatures generated in a good portion of the exhaust system that leaves these surfaces more susceptible than you would normally see during in what we'll call the old days of diesel truck operation. If you compare a diesel truck to a compressed natural gas operating truck, what you do is eliminate all of these other after treatment, exhaust after treatment system components. You eliminate your secondary catalyst, you eliminate your particulate filters, and most importantly, you eliminate that fuel line feeding this diesel particulate filter that burns on a regular basis and creates a very high temperature. So if you would take a CNG truck and a modern diesel trash truck and place them next to each other, if you were to look between the cab and the body, you're going to see a significantly larger amount of exhaust system components in that diesel truck that tend to get very hot. And like I said, there's no way to really protect it. That's been a big push, and it's a big advantage of the CNG system over diesel, is the fact that you can minimize the number of hot surfaces that you have on the truck. And it also makes the truck lighter and easier from a maintenance perspective to maintain.
Thank you. So in addition to the environmental benefits and all the things we're discussing and the modern safety features, it also has a kind of a built-in safety benefit of having just less hot surfaces.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the way the emission laws are going right now is that exhaust after treatment components are only increasing, and it's becoming, frankly, diesel engine manufacturers have a very hard time meeting these requirements, and they have to stack all this extra equipment into their vehicles. I'm sure everyone on the board has heard about what's happened with companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz, where they've been actually cited for violating federal laws because even though they have all this fancy high-tech equipment, they still can't get their emissions to meet the federal standards. Whereas with a CNG fueled vehicle, your emissions are automatically right off the bat much lower than with a diesel fired engine.
Thank you. And do you have any opinion or conclusion of the relative safety of a CNG vehicle versus a diesel vehicle? Do you have any hesitancy to say that they're at least as safe, if not more safe, than a diesel vehicle?
I would classify them as at least as safe or more safe from a general operation perspective. From a fire perspective, there's a less of a chance of having a fluid contamination on the ground from diesel escaping from an aluminum fuel tank during a fire. The venting operations that are all of the CNG itself are all heat activated. So it allows the CNG to vent up into the air away from the vehicle, which makes firefighting easier from the sense that they can let the gas vent and then attack the fire, extinguishing the fire rather than have to expose them to potential liquid spills and pool fires underneath the vehicle.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that was the extent of my questions for Mr. Jones.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sardo and Mr. Jones. I will go to Ms. Shapiro if she has any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions for this witness. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sawant?
Chairman, I don't have any questions for this witness either.
Okay. Fire Marshal Garrity?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sachs?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Board members, I see Mr. Connor on my left right now. Do you have anything, sir?
No questions, sir.
Mr. Dewhurst?
No questions.
Ms. Chevalier?
No questions.
Thank you. And Ms. Gilduff?
No questions.
And I personally have no questions as well. And he'll be available for questions at a later time, right?
Yes.
If something comes up this evening anyway. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You can move ahead. You're going to have one more witness, you said?
So I apologize. Christopher Tozy, who has been nice enough to share his time with us and join us, is a fire chief in Hamilton, New Jersey, where Waste Management operates a CNG facility. I just would like to offer him as a witness just to briefly share his experience with Waste Management as an operator and with this facility in that town.
Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, Mr. Tozy, actually, Mr. Sardo, he'll just be testifying as a fact witness, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Tozy, if you'll please raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, and your professional position, sir.
Christopher Tozzi, T-O-Z-Z-I. I'm Chief of Hamilton Township Fire District 2 in Mercer County.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tozzi. And you've been nice enough to join us this evening. I thank you for that. Can you explain to the board, in your experience as waste management, been a good citizen, so to speak, and operated in a safe and efficient manner in Hamilton to your expectations?
Yes, absolutely. They built the facility, immediately offered us training. The local companies did go to the training. We're continuously offered training. But it's a nice facility, and we've had no major issues at this facility as of yet.
Thank you. And would you, I guess, hesitate in any way to or offer cautions to any other municipality considering a similar operation and compound?
No, quite to the contrary. The emergency shutoffs, which are the biggest thing, we can shut the fuel off as soon as we enter the yard. We get technician response very quickly. We don't consider it an issue at all. It's a very safe facility, and we're happy with it.
Thank you. That was the extent of my questions for Mr. Tozzi.
Okay, I have the obvious one when you said no major problems. What about the minor ones?
No, minor issues. We had 2 or 3 calls that I could recollect in that facility. There were minor leaks. Actually, at night during the refueling process, police cars had smelled the mercaptan, which is an additive. But to that extent, we received no lower explosive limit readings whatsoever. The patrol actually shut off the fuel lines, the fill station itself with the emergency shutoffs. Took us a little while to find where the leak was coming from. That was quickly addressed, and that only happened 2, maybe 3 occasions. So very minor incidents. We definitely don't expect any major incidents with the safety features that are installed.
And if I may interject,
they're supposed to automatically shut off.
Was that, sir?
I thought that they're supposed to automatically shut off. You
They
say
do,
that
but if there's
patrol
no-
officers got to come in and turn it off.
Yes, sir. But if it doesn't exceed the lower explosive limit, it's not a hazard or danger. It's only the mercaptan, which is an additive to the gas, which people were smelling. So it actually wasn't even a hazard at that time. It's just passerby smelling mercaptan.
Fire Marshal Garrity?
Was that a leak from the mercaptan before? Was it added to the Cng?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question, sir.
Was the mercaptan, this was before it was added to the gas, or it was added to the gas at that time when they smelled it?
It was added to the gas. It was a minor line, I believe, on the in the actual apparatus itself that was leaking over a long period of time.
Okay, and I believe that you said that there's no automatic shut off. Is that correct?
No, there is an automatic shut off, as I'm aware, but just those red buttons are everywhere. And as you know, from our professional perspective, we just hit them anyway as being overly cautious.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Shapiro, anything of the chief?
No, Chairman, I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Sawant?
No, Chairman, I have nothing.
Okay. Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, actually, I'll ask this of Mr. Sardo. I obviously Hamilton Township being probably very similar in size to Old Bridge and demographically very similar. It appears, according to Mr. Tozzi, that you provided some type of training to the Hamilton Township Fire Department and fire districts. Is that something that would be offered to the Old Bridge fire districts as well?
absolutely. And I understand that Tom Mitchell's already, and Mr. Garrity perhaps can confirm this, but I believe that Tom Mitchell, we've already offered the training a month or more ago. And
yes, that is correct.
Okay,
the training was offered to Chief Walker, and of course, if the installation goes through, we are certainly going to take him up on that offer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any board member, well, Mr. Dewhurst, why don't I go to you?
For Chief Tozy,
Yes.
my question is that you said the leak was in the truck, not in the fueling station. Is that correct?
Well, it would be part of the apparatus, the truck itself. The fueling system was intact. It was it was somewhere within the piping to the tank, sir.
To the tank. Okay, so it wasn't at the fueling. That's a
It
difference.
wasn't.
Jim. I think what you were talking about, that's not the same as why they were fueling. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, John, that meeting, your technical talk here, that means that the truck was responsible, not the system.
Yes, that's why.
After it's being introduced into the vehicle.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, John. Jim Connor, anything?
No questions.
All right, Ms. Chevalier,
No questions.
Ms. Kilduff.
No questions.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Tazi, want to inform our board about?
No, I'll take them up on the training. And I did want to say, sitting here watching, you've built an even more safer and better facility with your input. It's a nice collaboration. It's a better facility than we have currently, and we consider it a very safe facility. So well done.
So Chief Tazi, thank you very much for being here this evening and informing of this of us. It's a great help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sardo, back to you.
And that brings us to our last witness, who is planner. It's Andrew Janu. He's from Beacon Planning. The board might recall at the last hearing in June that Mr. Janu's partner, Barbara Allen, was the professional planner. I think she had a conflict this evening, but Mr. Janu is the principal of the company, and he is ably available to testify this evening for us.
Good evening.
Okay. Good evening. And Mr. Janu, please raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
It's Andrew Janu, Janiw, principal at the firm of Beacon Planning and Consulting Services, located at 315 Highway 34 in Colts Neck, New Jersey. I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've appeared before both planning and zoning boards in Old Bridge on numerous occasions.
We'll accept Mr. Janu's credentials and his expertise.
Thank you.
And Mr. Janu, are you familiar with the application, the relief sought, and the testimony that was presented at the last hearing?
I am. The primary call it relief that was sought here is the relief of one condition on the conditional use variance, and that was with respect to location of, pursuant to the ordinance, auto repair facilities within 1,000 feet of each other. I believe testimony was entered into the nature of the relief and the nature of the facilities, and how this is really not the type of auto relief, auto service center that was anticipated within the zone plan, and why that's not an appropriate standard, if you will, to apply here. So I believe we've addressed the conditional use as well as the bulk relief. In terms of the revisions that have been made to the plan since the testimony was entered into at the previous hearing, what we've done is we've now eliminated a waiver with respect to the gravel drive that's going to be paved. We're adding some landscaping to the driveway. We've relocated the equipment to an area where it will not be visible for passerbys from 34. That was expressed as a concern of the board. And ultimately, what we've done is improve the circulation on the site. And I believe Ms. Samantha pointed out this evening that we would also need a relief in terms of a waiver for the size of the parking stalls being 9 by 18, not 10 by 20. And I certainly agree with her characterization of these as being employee-based. Again, the public is not permitted on this site. This is typically parking for the employees as they come to the site and then go on with their daily business. So I think it's an appropriate standard at 9 by 18. And at the end of the day, this application furthers not only points of your master plan with respect to the introduction and promotion of clean energy, but certainly something that the state and on a national level we're trying to achieve as well. As you know, the MLUL over the years has adopted numerous regulations, laws, and suggestions with respect to enhancing the promotion of all types of green energy. This is a wonderful alternative in terms of reducing carbon footprints, reducing emissions. You've heard extensive testimony tonight addressing concerns about any safety. So I think, at the end of the day, similar to the conclusions that were reached last time, the board certainly has the information available to vote affirmatively on this application. It does further the health, safety, and welfare of the general public in terms of introducing clean and green facilities, reducing gasoline and diesel fuel type of reliance. So I think on balance and with respect to the conditional use, nothing's changed in terms of the variance relief or the proofs with respect to the variance relief. And I do believe it's a good solid application. And I think over the years, you're going to see more of these.
Thank you. That really concludes my questions, my follow-up questions of our planner this evening. Subject to any redirect based on board or questions or otherwise.
You're not going to have any other witnesses this evening, correct, Mr. Sardo?
That I promised was my last witness.
Well, I'm just curious because I want to inform the public before I go to the professionals. I'm just going to make a quick announcement. For the next procedure and protocol, we're going to ask the township professionals if they have any questions of Mr. Janu who just testified. If you're at home and you have any interest in this application, I'm going to ask you if Ms. Sawant would put that number up again, to please phone in to the numbers that will be listed on the screen, and we will get to you when I open the public portion. Thank you for putting that up, Ms. Sawant. Having said that, Ms. Sawant, do you have any questions for Mr. Janu?
I have no questions.
Okay. Ms. Shapiro, do you have anything for Mr. Janu?
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing.
All right. Fire Marshal, anything that you want to add?
No, sir, I'm good with it.
Okay. Mr. Sachs, anything, Mr. Janu?
No, I'm fine, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Board members, Ms. Kilduff. You know what? Before I ask the board members, let me ask you one thing, board members. This is going to be the last witness for the evening. I don't know whether we're going to take a vote. It really doesn't matter tonight or at a later date. But I want to know now if anyone here present this evening from the board has any area of concern to direct to Mr. Sardo to address. And as well, if you have any questions to Mr. Janu as well. And I'll start with Ms. Kilduff.
No, I'm good.
Okay, and with all areas, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Ms. Chevalier?
Yeah, I'm good with all areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Connor?
I am fine with all areas.
Okay, and Mr. Dewhurst?
No, I think they did a great job in their presentation, to be honest with you.
Thank you. I believe they did as well. Okay, having said that, am I missing anybody? I asked Fire Marshal Hart and Fire Marshal Garrity. You're okay? Anything you would like to, Tom, anything that?
No, I would just have to say that they did a great job with the presentation. They were very open. Mr. Mitchell and I had numerous conversations. He offered Chief Walker any information that he would like. As I said, the training was part of that, and we will be taking them. But I'd just like to thank everybody for what they've done tonight.
Okay, so it sounds like there was full and open communications between your office and all the professionals?
Yes, sir.
And at this point, from a fire safety standpoint, you have no issues, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Mr. Sachs, or Mr. Sardi, you don't mind if I go to the public portion now, do you?
No, please do.
Okay, and then I'll come back to you for any final comments you have for the evening, or if you want to take a vote. For the public portion, once again, this is Waste Management in New Jersey. The number assigned to this application is 11-2020Z. If you've been listening, you know this is now the time when I've asked people to please call in on any of the numbers, and we will gladly entertain your questions or commentary and hopefully get you an answer or lead you to the right person to answer that. Ms. Sawant, is there anybody on the line at present?
I don't see any.
Oh, has it come up in front of you, Kim, as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
No hands have been raised.
Okay, let's give it another 1 minute, please, and make sure that there aren't people trying to call in right now. For all those listening, I'm sure you can hear my cockatoo downstairs screaming. I think he has a question, but I'm not going to call on him. All right, Mr. Sachs, are we complying with present law as handed down recently, reference to making sure the public gets notice and has adequate time to call?
Yes, I believe we have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. In that case, and Ms. Sawant, once again, no calls, right?
No calls.
Okay. I'm going to close the public portion at this juncture, and I'm going to go back to Mr. Sarda for any final comments. And perhaps Mr. Sachs, would be better for you to ask Mr. Sarda what his intentions are.
Yeah, sure. Well, Mr. Sarda, why don't, John, if you want to sum up it all, why don't you do that, and then I'll go back to you.
Thank you. Yes, in summation, there's been a lot of testimony, discussion, and the applicant is, obviously requesting that the board approve this proposal. There's been significant discussions and input from the municipality, which the applicant has tried to and has agreed to meet the recommendations and requests. This is an environmentally friendly project and would result in an upgrade to this entire site with the paving improvements, etc. That's really the summation of what we're asking for this evening. But with respect to there only being 5 board members, I do think we're going to request to come back and take a vote at the, I guess, the next meeting. Is it in November, Mr. Sachs?
Yeah, it would be November. That's your decision, Mr. Sardo, if you'd like. And I generally only do this when there's only 5 votes, 5 voters, eligible voters, because normally we have a board that would have 7. So you got a little bit of wiggle room. But sometimes I'll ask board members, and I could do it this evening, if anybody has any reservations about this project. I'm not asking you to say how you're going to vote, but certainly if you've got any reservations about the project, maybe some of the board members can weigh in, Mr. Chairman. And maybe, Mr. Sardi, you want to take a vote tonight. I mean, just to throw my 2 cents in, I mean, I think from when we started this application back in June, I think you've now, your team has answered a lot of questions. And, if I hear that Fire Marshal Garrity is satisfied with it, that to me is the important thing. And I think one of the conditions of approval here, if it is acted favorably upon, is that I would add this as a condition, that there be ongoing training with our fire district with respect to this site. But I'll throw it back to the chairman first. Mr. Chairman, would you like to again go through the board to see if there's any reservations whatsoever about this project?
Yeah, I'll just say something as well. And I thank Mr. Sardo and all the professionals for a very, very comprehensive testimony tonight from all your witnesses. I think fire safety is certainly paramount to any community, and I think that was the concern that was brought up early on. I think that has been addressed, and I think it's been addressed well, and I think it's been addressed to the fullest. I was impressed by the fact that the chief from another department would come and weigh in on what has happened there. I am not a fireman. I never was, and I can't speak as to those things, but I can ask questions, and I think I asked those tonight, the most important questions to make sure that we have safety there. If Fire Marshal Garrity is good with something, I'm certainly good with it, and I know that he has been instrumental in this community and very concerned over public safety, as well as Chief Walker, by the way. And I give them credit for all the volunteer personnel. We don't have many more. People don't seem to be volunteering anymore. So if these people are satisfied with this, they're the ones that have to go out. I would add one thing to back up Mr. Sachs. I would hope that fire training would not only be limited to the Cheesequake Fire District, but the other fire districts here in the township. And I would hope that would be an agreement. because I think it's important that all of them know. So if Mr. Sardi, would you go on the record as saying that that would be offered to all the departments here in Old Bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. Without reservation, I can say that we agree to that.
Okay. And
In
listen,
fact, any interested emergency responder, whether
Right.
it's first
well, I'm
aid.
sure that that can be planned out with emergency management and with the fire companies, and the right people would come, and I'm sure want to know all the information they can gather. You know, their lives are on the line too when they're going to fight for the lives of others. So I'm sure they would have interest. I can tell you, Mr. Sardo, from my experience, and I've sat on this board since 2006, and I know all of the people on this board, and many of them have sat here for many years as well. I think when I asked them the last time, and if you would like, I'll ask them again, but I think that they were sincere, and I think they understood what I wanted to know. And there's a lot of money and effort and time put into this application, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the modernization of Waste Management's project in order to kind of go green. And apparently this fuel sounds a heck of a lot better than fossil fuels, that being diesel in these bigger trucks. I'll ask the board members one more time if they have any thing that they would feel uncertain about giving approval. Obviously, I can't ask them how they're going to vote, and you know that, Mr. Sardo. But I feel rather confident that no one would be deceptive in their answer. So if that weighs in on, and I'm not trying to influence you one way or the other, sir, whether you want to take a vote or not, that's up to you and your applicant. But I can attest to the honesty and the integrity of the people on this board. So in my upper right-hand corner, I see Ms. Kilduff, whose own father probably spent over 50 years in fire service to this, offering it to this community. Am I right on that? 50 years or more, probably?
60, and my brother and my nephew.
Okay. You have just as much concern, I'm sure, Ms. Kilduff, about fire safety, do you not? Do you
Absolutely.
do you have any problems with this particular issue, this application?
I do not.
Okay. Ms. Chevalier, I don't know your background and whether anybody in your family has anything to do with fire emergency services. But once again, do you have any concerns with this application this evening?
My father and both my brothers were volunteer firemen here in
Okay.
Old Bridge, so I have no concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Connor?
I have no
Same
concerns.
question.
I have no concerns.
Okay, and Mr. Dewhurst is another long-term fireman in this, serving as a volunteer in this community. How many years, John?
30.
30 years, that's a long time too. I'll ask you the same question, Mr. Dewhurst. Do you have any?
I have no issues. And Jim, just so you know that anytime training is done, all the fire companies get together. If something is different in one district from another to do cross training, it's just naturally. So if it's offered, it will happen.
Okay, thanks, John. I didn't know that, and
Always.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And finally, Mr. Sachs, you have anything you want to bring up?
No, that's, I think, Mr. Sardo, hopefully you got an indication that, I think, there's a good sentiment for this application. So that's your decision, whether or not you want to go forward tonight. Certainly you need all 5 votes. I will also state that it's interesting. I think one of the witnesses was testifying as to the New Jersey Energy Master Plan, which I had heard of, but during some of the testimony, I took the time to read about it. And I think, I'm not sure which witness said, I think Mr. Janu said it. He goes, this is pretty much what you're going to start seeing now. I think everything, any type of vehicle that's going to be on our roadways is going to, public vehicles in particular, are going to start going towards alternative energy sources for their fueling. So I think this fits within it. But Mr. Sardo, it's your call. If you want to go forward with the vote tonight, we can. If you want to hold off on it, we can do that as well.
I appreciate everything that's been said, the board members' input, the chairman's representations, and I have had the opportunity to confer with my client, and they have advised me that they'd like to take a vote this evening. So
Let's give credit to that was Dr. Ryder who brought that up, Mr. Sachs.
Yes.
Talking about the 2019 energy. plan.
Yes, yeah. So, okay, so we can go forward with the vote. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure the next question you're going to ask me is, what are we voting on tonight?
Yeah, well, we know we're going to start with a D3, correct?
It's a D3,
Right.
and then if that is successful, then it would be an amended preliminary and final site plan. And I don't think there's any bulk variances. I don't know. Vina, are there any bulks?
I have made. Yeah,
There was waivers of parking.
I'm sorry, waivers. Okay, so some design waivers. Okay,
There are bulk variances, Larry.
all right.
One is for the accessory structure being in the front yard.
Okay,
Then there are three existing non-conformities. One is the landscape area ratio. 0.4 is required. They are at 0.19, maybe slightly more than 0.19 now with the landscaping that is proposed within the parking area. But however, they're not at 0.4. There is no loading zone proposed. It's a commercial property, so that would be a variance. And then sidewalk between buildings and the paved areas. That is another variance, but three of them are existing variances. The only new variance is location of accessory structures, section 250-38.16A, table 2. Accessory structures are not permitted in the front yard. And we have the outdoor equipment area within the front yard. That is a variance.
okay.
And there are a number of waivers. Table 3, page 5 of my report. And in addition to all the waivers that are listed on table 3, there is one additional waiver, which is for the parking stall size.
Okay, right. Okay.
And Vina, sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you covered this. I believe the fence height around the equipment area, there's, I think 6 foot's permitted, 8 foot's proposed to screen the equipment, just for,
That would be another variance.
right. And I believe it was called out, and
Yeah.
we did cover it in testimony.
Yes.
Okay.
And just before we go for a vote, Mr. Sardo, the applicant agrees to fully cooperate with all the recommendations of the township professionals, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Mr. Sachs, in essence, we'll start with the D3, then we have the
Yes.
bulk, and then we have the waivers, correct?
Yep, and then
And
the
then
site plan.
I have listed as a major site plan.
It's an amended major site plan. That's
Amended
correct.
major site plan? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. In that case, this is a D3 for expansion of non-conforming use.
Additional use, right.
Okay. Having heard that, would someone want to move the D3 variance? I will move it. Is there a second?
Second, Dewhurst.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. And the bulks, as mentioned by Ms. Sawant on the record,
Yep,
we can take them together, correct?
yes.
Okay, someone want to move the bulk variances?
I'll move them, Dewhurst.
I'll second Connor.
Second is Mr. Connor. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. And then the waivers also as enumerated on page 5 of the planner's memo, and also to include the parking stall size, correct?
Mhm. Yes.
9 by 18. Okay. Someone want to move that? The waivers.
Motion, Kilduff.
Is there a second?
Second, Chevalier.
Chevalier seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. And then it would be amended major.
Amended
preliminary?
preliminary. Yep, amended preliminary.
I'll move it. Is there a second?
Second, Kilduff.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Kilduff,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. And then amended major site plan final, correct?
Yes.
Someone move it, please.
I'll move it, Connor.
Is there a second to Mr. Connor?
Chevalier second.
Chevalier seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst,
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier,
Yes.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Ms. Gelder,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Mr. Sardo, thank you and all your professionals for this application this evening and their testimony.
Hey, thank you for your time and for sitting through it all. Appreciate it.
Okay, best
Thank
of
you,
luck on
John.
the project.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Mr. Sachs, anything else to bring before the board from, obviously not having to do with this? I mean,
No other, obviously, now that you've authorized me to file the answer on the Metro storage, I will get that filed forthwith. And I will certainly keep the board apprised as to where that's going.
Mr. Sachs, I read that I guess it's okay to say that perhaps I don't think it's some division in the state wants to make the rules a little tougher for doing these meetings. Mr. Rizzoli, no, Mr. Rizzoli, the attorney.
Mark Roselli.
Roselli, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And don't we seem to be complying with each and every one of those?
Yeah, let me just let the board know, there was a directive that came out late last week, I believe, from the local finance board of the Department of Community Affairs of the state of New Jersey. And essentially gave out, it was a several-page directive as to how municipalities should be conducting their virtual meetings, that they should try to have in-person public meetings if they can, cognizant of the fact that we're still in a public emergency situation. So part of the problem, I think, with most municipalities is that you still have limitations on the amount of people who can be inside a municipal courtroom or municipal auditorium or inside the building. So I know a lot of towns have taken the stance that it's really difficult to have in-person meetings because you don't want to deprive the public of their due process right to participate at a public meeting. Certainly the virtual meeting, you don't have that issue because anybody can participate. However, they have implemented some other procedures that need to be in place if you're going to have the virtual meetings. Honestly, I think, and as everyone on the board knows, I just don't, that I represent several municipalities. I have to tell you, our system is superior to some of the other towns that I'm involved in. So there's really nothing we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, to tweak this. There is a procedure there is a recommendation that if you're going to have virtual meetings, you can post something on a website stating that you can pass along a written question, which would then get answered by the board or by an applicant. But I think we're already addressing that as well on our notice. So I think we're in good shape. Now, of course, if the administration in the municipality determines that they want to start having public meetings, then we can follow suit with that. But my concern always is that you do have some capacity limitations in that courtroom under some social distancing now that may make it a little difficult. But we'll see. If it's a non-controversial application, you probably can do it. But if it's a controversial one, it's going to be very difficult.
I did read that area on written letters, but from a legal standpoint, can you accept those as?
Well, that you can, according to this local finance board, you can, but it has to be answered either by the applicant or by the board. I don't really see that being something that's ever going to come up because I think in today's world, everybody either has access to a computer, an iPad, or a cell phone. You could be on your cell phone and log into this meeting. Many people have. So I think we're in good shape. I mean, I don't know. I will talk to Mr. Roselli and see what he thinks. I think the council tried to meet, or they may even still be meeting in person, but they're not letting the public into the building. So, it somewhat defeats the purpose if the public can't come into the building. So,
Right.
Yeah.
A question, Ms. Silverman. We do, and I don't know, not blaming you or not saying it's your job, but isn't all of this agenda always put up on the township's website as well? Along
Yes,
with
it is. It's in a couple of spots.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mr. Sachs.
And we have a link that they can get into, that they can now also look at everything.
Right. Okay. Ms. Sawan, anything you want to tell the board?
Yes, actually, I did speak to Larry this afternoon because originally when these regulations came in, I had this in mind that suppose if we are going to have in-person meeting, maybe we can just schedule one meeting per night, one application per night. However, looking at the zoning board's agenda and how busy the zoning board has been, it might not be possible because it will just delay the hearing process for many applicants and we'll have to keep granting extensions. I think when I spoke to the business administrator this afternoon, he directed me to actually speak to Larry, and if we are comfortable, if Larry is comfortable to conduct these virtual meetings, we would just continue conducting virtual meetings, because if there are multiple applications, if we have a bigger crowd, then the courtroom can accommodate only, I think, 23 residents. So then it becomes a little challenging. Whereas if we have a virtual meeting, then we can take in as many residents as possible. Plus, when I had spoken to Mr. Rizzoli about this, Mark had mentioned that maybe in our notice we should include an option for written submission, and we can create an email address wherein residents can send their written comments if they have any. I don't know if we will really get a lot of them. However, we can probably tweak our notice, and Larry and I spoke about that as well.
Yeah, Jim, let me just add one other thing. I don't know of any municipalities that have gone completely live. I'm talking in Middlesex County. I don't know of any that really have done that yet. Yeah, I'm talking about planning and zoning boards. They're all virtual meetings at this point.
Just a quick question, Larry.
Yeah.
Metro Storage, how is that going with the court? Is it?
Well, I haven't filed an answer yet because I still haven't technically been served by Mr. Wishaskala, but he assured me today that he's going to serve me. So now I'll be able to answer the complaint. So.
Okay, but the courts, are they back or?
Well, that's good. Yeah, the courthouses are still closed in New Jersey. The plan was to open them up on September 21st. That date's come and gone. My understanding now is the next potential date for the courthouses to open is November 16th. I don't know if that's going to happen. My opinion is I don't think the courthouses are going to be open until next year. Certainly for jury trials. Now, a case like this would be a non-jury trial, which you could do, which by the way, I've had non-jury cases virtually since March. I mean, so those cases are proceeding. So this case ultimately could go to court, even if the courthouse is closed, and it'll just be a virtual trial.
Okay, and you would agree that we're doing everything we can possibly do to comply with all the rules.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Shapiro, anything finally from you?
No, but I just want to remind everybody that I might have mentioned that, and I can't remember if it was to the zoning board and planning board, but we're doing renovations to the courtroom. And, I slowed down the pace a little bit because, for construction purposes, we had to wait for 2021 so that we can get everything in construction. Ideally, I prefer us doing it now while there's limited use in the courtroom. What's great or sort of like a silver lining to the pandemic is that the CARES Act is allowing us to gain funding for socially distancing, for HVAC upgrades, So that would aid then in support of constructing sooner than later. So I did promise a presentation to the Planning and Zoning Board for any of the improvements that's going to go on to the courtroom. And Vina and I are going to work on getting that on the schedule for next month's meeting.
Thank you. All right, absent anybody else, anybody, any board member want to raise their hand? They have anything they want to add? No? Well, then you know what time it is, I guess.
Motion.
Some for an adjournment. All in favor? The meeting stands adjourned for October 1st. Good night, everyone.
Next meeting is.
Good night, everyone.
Hold on, you're supposed to second, not make them.
Sorry,
Get that down.
couldn't do it anymore.
All right, everyone have a great weekend.
Good night.
Right.